Take a look at neighborhood conflict. This is a game Abram Jones has put together. The story behind it's kind of interesting. Now, I'm doing this as a I don't know what the word is. This is a review copy. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I'm in great shape right now. On my own side of things, I've kicked up the heat so that I can be up here to do this. Moved Gloomhaven down to another room where it'll be easier to keep things warm, because I figure I can be kind of quiet with Gloomhaven, and this way, you know, I can do something else up here, because I got a couple of reviews coming in at this point. The concept behind this is really intriguing. Basically, this was a game that the designer and friends, I guess, played as a real life type situation when they were kids. And they basically made fake little, I don't know what the word is for it. I guess it's neighborhoods in this, and ran separate economies for them all, and kind of ran the whole system as an economic system, but with some non-economic effects thrown in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. What do we have? These are, okay, so there's two divisions. There's households and neighborhoods. A household consists of a number of different neighborhoods. And each of the neighborhoods has its own card. Now, these are, and this is kind of a lost opportunity, but these are double, everything in the game is back printed with the same information on it, which is a bit of a shame. But these are going to represent areas in which you can, well, no, there's also areas within them, but a neighborhood in which you can invest and produce some kind of income from, okay? And each one can accept certain currencies and allow them to be used within it, which is one facet to it. Each player, I believe, has, if I understand things correctly, has their own stocks that they can create their own company with, that they run, and but other people can end up as president of the company that they started or whatever. And I guess then maybe they can start another one. I don't know. I got to tell you one thing. The rule book fails completely. And the designers, and I'm going to make my best to try to hash through this. But I have to say, I've read it. I've watched the designers' videos, which look like my videos without an intro. They're claiming to teach the game, but they are just really kind of a playthrough, showing some of the mechanisms at work. And that's almost what this is. It's the way it works is it just lists something that, you know, some facet and almost a notes type format to it. It's almost like a scratch pad for a game, and it's an intriguing game, but. And it says edition 1, which I think to me means he does understand that the rule, and I think he's discussed this with me as well, that the rules are very, very sketchy. I don't know if I can get a useful play out of this from these rules, but we'll see. But basically, it's something that someone has to sit down with an amount of, you know, fortitude and discipline and meld these rules into something more than what they really are, which at this point is not much better than a set of notes. There doesn't seem to be a contradiction, but there seems to be things that are just so missing from them. For example, what you're trying to do, although there is a victory condition to it. The victory condition is going to be you add up the value of all the different currencies you hold and the value of any stocks that you hold, which, you know, sounds like an 18xx game. But there are a lot of different opportunities in here for things that are different. So anyway, these are the neighborhoods. The number along here indicates how many areas in the neighborhood that a particular player holds. Now, that number goes higher than the number of areas that any of these, well, no, this one goes up to 9. Anyone can possibly get in most of them. That's kind of a design shame unless that number's to be used for something else, which I haven't seen reflected there. These are the character cards, and they show some information on them. This is if they're an NPC, it indicates, the number next to them indicates what they kind of randomly do if you roll for their action on a turn. If they're a player, then a player can choose any of the actions listed, and there's no weighting, you know. So like, he's not, well, this guy, for example, is very likely to do nothing. So, you know, you wouldn't choose that if you played it as a character. The number along here, again ranging from 1 to 9, at least in these rules, there is an expansion to it that I do not have, although I have at least one card which seems to interact or be necessary for the expansion. Maybe the expansion's online as a whole, although I know there's more neighborhood cards and stuff, but maybe you just print it out. So these numbers, from what I can tell, are only useful for the NPCs. They indicate the relationship or the way the NPC views the character in question. Okay, that's interesting. You have the name of the character, a little picture, a little standee that'll indicate where that character is going to be, and then this fighting and exploration. I'm pretty sure exploration doesn't have a use. Again, you know, the rules didn't sink in because of the nature that they're in. Fighting, I believe that is actually covered in these rules. What is not on these is the age of the characters, which apparently is an important facet, and I can't find anything that I've seen that indicates the age, except kids choose their actions in order from birth to youngest to oldest, and the designer says it's clearly on the cards, which I don't see at all. So I don't know what to do about that. What there is an age order, I think, within each household, but no division of the age of the characters outside of the households, which I think should be a factor to this, and I don't have any indication of that. Over here, this is going to be the values of the different stock companies. There are only 5 available. I don't know if there's just a 6th one available or if they go all the way up to Z if you have the expansion, but as of right now, these are the only ones that are available. You have a time tracking mechanism here, and then this is to indicate the valuation of the currencies, which can range from 0.001 cents all the way up to 10 cents per unit of that currency. Okay. What else do we have here? We have counters, and I'll go over what these are used for. I haven't been able to figure everything out yet. And again, as I play around, maybe I will. But for example, there's red and black number counters. And there's a place in here where they kind of indicate there's a differentiation between them, but it's not clearly stated for me. Not clearly enough for me to understand. You have a couple of dice. Zeros are always 10s in this. The hexagonal pieces, these are going to keep track of the game date. Yep. Grab the wrong piece. And the year. So we're going to start in January of '88. And the game has a game master to it who as far as I can tell, the only thing he does is sets up the starting conditions for the game, so that basically what you've got is many, many different scenarios, especially if you have the expansions, but they're all kind of configure your own. And I have not yet made mine up. You can see I don't have things set up yet because I'm not absolutely certain of much of anything. You have these cubes, which are going to keep track of which currencies, of the 4 different currencies. Now, why are there 4 different currencies? Again, I'm not absolutely certain of this. My feeling is, yes, here's why. Because there are probably only 4 characters who have the capability to build currencies. That's 2, 3, 4, yeah. I think there's 4 different characters who can make currencies. And not everybody can necessarily make stocks either. So for example, he can make stock. Let's just see. Looks like everybody's going to have a capability for stock, and that makes sense because these counters are used for stock. They have the initials of the characters. Yeah. Okay. There should be 7 kids pieces. One of them's duplicated because of printing reasons. There's these little house markers. I don't know what they're useful for. They represent 3 different households, but the households are kind of grouped together. You know, this counter can just go with whichever household you want it to go with, basically. I really don't see any value to these 3 things, but you know, I love my little jellied pieces. These came with it. Game Crafter makes jellied pieces, all except this little white one. The cubes are jellied. I love those. They look so awesome to me. And yeah, this is what you get if you order it. And well, now wait a minute. We have commodities. I did not see any rules on commodities at all, but I'll put that out there. And the Z stock, I think that's all from the expansion, but maybe it's actually useful here. And for counting amount of each currency, black and gray, and currency, okay. So black with gray text on it is for counting, is for positive currency values, and the red is for loans, and then stock value is also tracked on the stock market chart, and I can show you how that works. All right, so that's what you get with the game. Let's talk a little bit about what a turn means. The turns are going to be month-long each. You basically get to do 1 action with your character in each turn, and you play for however many years, months, whatever that you want to. And I don't know how far I'm going to go. Basically, we're going to see if anything makes sense. And your goal is to generate income, is to generate capital for yourself in stock value and in cash. Okay. Some general rules on tie breaking, which is basically just hey, how to randomize the game. The turn order. Okay, so in each, and there's no player aid that gives this kind of information, which would be helpful to have a detailed information on a card. In fact, in a lot of ways, the rule book seems to be more of a player aid than much else. The first thing you do is you pay loans. I don't know what that means. I don't remember there being interest in them. Game moderator then rolls a die on each household to see if there's a random event that affects that household, and that random event is basically parental actions that screw something up. And then each kid is going to get 1 action, and then the game master rolls random actions for the NPCs, and I think the NPCs go in whatever player order that they would normally go in. And that's it. Okay. Let me swap batteries and I'll be back in a moment. So when you roll for a natural or parental disaster, it's going to be based on the strictness level of each household, which is, again, not present anywhere on the player items. The only place you're going to see it is by opening up the rule book and finding it. If a household is strict, and basically the 3 households each have their own value, but if it's strict, on a 4 or higher, you avoid a parental disaster. Moderate, it's a 3 or higher. Friendly, it's a 2 or higher. That gives you your percentages. Here they are. Here are the 3 strictness levels. Again, it's just assigned to the households. And then if you have a disaster, you roll again on a d6. On a 1 through 4, kid is unavailable because the kid is grounded. I think you randomly determine one of the kids in the family that's in play. On a 5, the parent is doing something and destroys an area within one of the neighborhoods. And on a 6, the parent is doing something that destroys company assets. Now, each of these has their own rules. If the kid is unavailable, they have to return to their household if not already there. They go next to the house piece, and they can't do anything. They can't take any actions or interact with other kids at all for the entire month. This includes any in-game interactions with other players. At the start of the next turn, they get to choose which village of that household they start in before making their move. And they have to pay rent for their choice if applicable. I don't remember any rent, but I guess if you don't own any locations, maybe. Okay. And NPCs kind of do this randomly, I guess. If parental area destruction happens, if there's more than one village in a household, the tie-breaking method has to be used to determine which village. If there's more than one kid that owns an area in that village, the tie-breaking method must be used. The same chief will remain in power if the chief's only area is removed. Okay. Whoever owns the most areas in a neighborhood is called the chief. He has some special abilities. If there's no areas in the household at all, however, the event will be ignored. And that can happen. This only has a maximum. This is one whole household. It only has a maximum of 1 area in it. Nobody wants to play there. Poor Jake. But, what that means is if that area has already been destroyed, bad things can happen at his house and nothing, goes on. And, if you're not playing with that household, that area won't be in play. You could play with less villages in a given household, depending on what the game master wants to set the scenarios. If company assets are taken, the president, if a kid belonging to the household is president of a company, that company will be the victim. If there's more than one such company, you tie break. After a company is selected, you roll a die, and that'll be how many 10% increments of the company's stock price is reduced. That is not spelled out. Is that 10% of the current price, or is it, just basically pips down? I think it's supposed to be 10% of the current value of the stock. But again, if there's no such companies, the event's ignored. Then kids get to choose their actions. Once again, in order of birth from youngest to oldest, which is not specified as far as I can tell, other than in this household order thing, which is insufficient to match the role. Players are able to conduct any of the actions on the map for their kid, but if there are NPCs in the game, they can't do the same action twice in a row. The reason for that, why that restriction makes sense only if there's NPCs, is there's many of the actions that don't have an effect without NPCs. So commending, complaining, this is all ways of influencing the relationship that an NPC has to different characters. So people who don't have as many abilities, well, then they have lots of lounge capabilities, whatever. Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look at what each of the different actions are. And there are a lot. And some of them are going to, this is how the rules are exposed, is through the different actions. Again, no general concepts or anything, just what happens if you do something. And that what happens may introduce completely new ideas into what you think of the game so far. In fact, a lot that I've explained is contained within these already. Okay, so you can do a build action. In order to do this, you have to see if there's areas available to be built in the location that the kid's in. You add up the total amount of areas that kids already have owned and subtract it from the maximum amount. If there's at least one left, you roll a die for success. And this is based on how strict the household is. So a strict household would normally succeed on only a 1, a moderate household on a 1 or 2, a friendly on a 1 through 3. NPCs are going to be twice as effective because they like kissing ass with the parents, I guess, just to make them more important in the game. If it's successful, it'll increase the area number by 1. And you use a little marker with the kid's initials on it. And if an NPC does not have an area to build, they'll attempt to purchase an area. If they can't do either, then they'll try to work. Players are allowed to purchase an area instead of build an area if their kid has the build skill. Okay, so they can, even if they don't have the purchase action, if they have the build action and there's no chance to build in the area, even a player can try to purchase. And whoever has the most, the kid with the most areas ends up being the chief. If there's a draw, the previous chief remains such. Okay, the purchase action. This can only be done within the village the kid is located in and with a currency that's accepted in the village. No currency is accepted, as in the beginning of the game. You can't buy anything. The player can choose to purchase an area from an NPC that has an area for the NPC's price. We'll see that in a moment. Or make a deal with another player that has an area. And this will remove 1 area from the seller's amount and increase 1 for the buyer. So I'm assuming 2 players can come to any agreement they like for selling, but you still have to take a purchase action. An NPC will attempt to purchase an area at the lowest price that another NPC or player offers. Players are allowed to undercut other offers. The NPC cost in cents is going to be equal to 10 minus the perceptive attribute. That's the value that that NPC sees your character as. So if he really likes you, it might go down. Times 10 minus the number of the seller's number of areas in the village. So a seller with a lot of areas in the village views those areas as less valuable, which I don't know if that's appropriate. And the reason I don't know if it's appropriate is it seems like there's an advantage to having lots of areas in a village, especially for a player character. And we'll get to that in a moment. If an NPC cannot afford a price in any accepted currency, they will attempt to take a loan. Okay? That's a different action, right? Maybe not. It looks like it should be, because it's listed under actions, but nobody has that capability. So anyway, I guess that means you will only take a loan if you only get the loan action if you're forced into that option. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Because some of these other things have the same headings as the actions do, but they're not listed as actions. So maybe these things are just little rules that are now needed. Right? Like default attributes. That's obviously not an action. Each NPC starts with a prestige of 7. Each NPC will start with a 7 opinion of other NPCs. Each NPC will start with a 3 opinion of each player, and each player starts with a prestige of 3, which is unimportant if there's no NPCs in the game. The minimum values are 1 and the maximum 9. Players don't have opinions of other kids. Okay. Well, so I think taking a loan is not an action. It's a capability. NPCs will accept 1 loan at a time. Players can accept as many loans as they wish. However, if a player has already granted a loan to an NPC or player, they cannot grant another to that NPC until the loan is paid off. Loans charge an immediate 25% interest on the amount. I think this means, like, if I want to borrow, $4 from you, I take out a $5 loan. Again, it's not all clarified, but that's probably the most reasonable way, because if I need money, I shouldn't probably have to pay the interest on that money right away. It makes calculations painful, but whatever. No interest will ever follow this. Any currency in a kid's treasury during loan payment phase can be taken. Sounds like you don't have an option. You must give a loan. That's the way it sounds to me. Is that correct? I don't know. This game has some very weird implications to it. NPCs will always take all available currency as payment. Really sounds like it. You're giving me a loan, buddy. Loans can only be established with types of currencies that are accepted in the village that the action takes place, if applicable. Well, I don't see... You probably can't spend money in a region. I'm just going to say, if money's not accepted in that region, we ain't going to do this. That, if applicable, I'm not sure exactly what it means. I'm going to read it that way. Players can arrange loans for players for any reason, but NPCs will only take loans when they are purchasing an area. Okay. If an NPC is attempting to take a loan and they can't get one from the kid they are purchasing the area from, other players can give them the loan if they have the appropriate type and amount of currency. Other NPCs will not do this. Okay, so you can't force people to take loans unless you're buying something from them. No, you can't force someone to sell you something. So if you're afraid of a loan taking all your cash, don't offer to sell anything, because the NPC will steal all your money, and a player can apparently do the same. Okay. We already dealt with this. Let's go back here. If an NPC can, upon a successful transaction, the NPC's opinion of the other kid will increase by 1 for both the buyer and seller. So if they're both NPCs, they'll both get a change. Otherwise, any NPC involved in the transaction gets a 1-level change. That's how I read that. It's not clear, but it's the only reasonable assumption there. Okay, the currency value. This is the amount value in proportions of a cent. Chiefs of the villages can choose to accept or outlaw any currency in their villages by placing or removing the currency cube of their village. Every time a village accepts a currency, it increases the value of that cube. Let's say it starts here by 1 space. So let's say Ducktown wants that. That goes up to 0.01. It becomes somewhat more valuable. All right. And whenever it denies the use of a currency, it reduces the value. Like, if the currency was accepted before, they can deny it, and it'll reduce it back down. Yep. NPC chiefs will automatically accept currencies of NPCs if their perceptive attribute, i.e. what they think of them, is 5 or higher, or the currencies of players if it's 7 or higher. And they will outlaw anything lower. If a kid accepts or outlaws a currency of an NPC in their village, the NPC's opinion will go up or down by 1 based on that. When transferring currency, the amount may not always exactly match the cent value. In these cases, the buyer or payer should carry the burden if there's no change in the receiver's treasury. NPCs will always go through with the transaction if there is no change in receiver's treasury. If exact change can't be given, whoever's buying will pay more. That's what is meant by that. The wordings are difficult for me as well. Okay. When there's multiple types of currencies to be transferred by an NPC, you use the tie-breaking method or the currency that is able to make the easiest transaction based on its value. Accepted currency has to be used, however, no matter what. All right. So there's 4 characters who can make currencies. Black currency is made by Jake Peterson, green by Scotty Smith, purple by Mayumi Smith, and orange by Kent Luxtari. And again, not all the characters may be in this. You could get rid of currency entirely by leaving these 4 characters out of the game. To get the full experience, you probably want at least a couple of characters who can print currencies, either as players or NPCs. They don't all have to be players. Okay, we talked about loans. Okay, now we're on to another action, and I is going to take another break since I've already taken one. My charger not working right. You know, the heat situation here. To heat the whole main area of the house, and that includes firing up this thing here, which I had to turn on. It's really funny. I did it last year a few times without burning the fire, and I basically kept the heat on even when the fire was going to help do things. But basically, without the fire going, I'm paying about twice as much in electricity a month, and the house still doesn't get warm. It's only that like is powerful enough to heat it up. The baseboards suck. Okay, and let me fire up my pipe. Alrighty, work actions. So some of the kids can do work actions. If they're not president of a company, they will form a company. What does that mean if they can't start a company? I'm not sure. They can choose to work for any company they want, however. When forming and this is A through E, or A through Z with the expansion, which is why, because also I don't think there are artifacts, fruit, gems, or goods in this game. Okay. When you form a company, you get a stock in the company and you become president of the company. You can choose to work for any company you want. The work by the player will increase the stock value of the company by the amount of areas you have in the village. So if you work in a particular village and you have no areas, you won't increase it, but otherwise you can pump its stock value up. In whatever village you're in. When an NPC works, however, it increases the stock price by the amount of areas they have in whichever household they're in, instead of just within the neighborhood they're in. NPCs choose to increase the stock price of a company they're president of or the company they have the next most stock. Now, if you perform a work and you're not president of a company, you form one company, which kind of disagrees with this, hey, you'll work with one, you can work with any or whatever, so I don't know. And the NPC will choose the stock price of the company they're in. And the companies aren't really associated with the areas particularly. So you could be working for any old company and you improve it by what you own. So I don't know, you could see them as kind of, I don't know, maybe delivery routes or something like that. I have no idea what it's meant to represent. Because this is representing a game that was made by kids, you know? So they may not have really had a good idea of what it was meant to represent. If an NPC has no work to do, they will attempt to build if they have that attribute, i.e. if they roll, get work, and can't do anything of value. Company volatility. Okay, what's up with this? Well, I don't know, because I've seen this term before. I have not seen it in effect in the game. This is determined by the strictness of the company the player belongs to, or that the president of the company belongs to. We'll see if we find any link to anything with that. So far I have not, but I don't read terribly carefully. Okay, now we're back to actions. Now, volatility is not listed under the work action, and I don't think it's under the stock action either. So, currency action, you're allowed to print 10 of your currency. You have to have the currency action. There's only certain kids who can do this, and that'll be entered into their own treasury. They move the currency down a space on the currency value counter. Now, one notable thing is, if no one accepts the currency, it has no value at all, and you can't do that. You can't print currency unless it has some value. So you have to convince people to accept your currency, and not just one neighborhood. You have to convince 2 neighborhoods before you can print any of it, and then it becomes pretty valueless. So money doesn't start out valuable unless you can get people to agree to use it, which makes sense. Okay. This does not seem to align exactly with how the designer explained it. He looked like he was printing currency without having gotten anyone to agree to it and just starting it at 0.01. I don't think that's what the rules actually imply. And yeah. Okay, stock action. So when you get a stock action, and again, not everybody has all of these actions, you can purchase any stock that you can afford using any currency type. When this happens, the chosen currency is removed from your treasury and put into the treasury of the company's president. Okay, there's no idea of a separate company who gets the money for the stock. The president, whoever that is, and it's the person with the most shares in something, just gets the cash themselves, which is a little weird. It doesn't seem weird when you're selling your fresh shares, but once other people hold shares of it, you're getting all the capital from that in your own pocket and diluting everyone's shares. So stocks seem a little dangerous to invest in by that means. When a stock is purchased, it must be purchased at the value 1 cent higher than its listed price, and this raises the price to that amount. And stocks appear to be limited between 1 and 10 cents. Players can also sell any stock that the president can pay back to them using any currency. This will not increase the stock number of the president. So this is really interesting. I can destroy a president's money by selling his stock back to nowhere. And i.e. I'm helping everyone. So it's kind of the reverse of that situation. So it's kind of a weird circumstance. And there doesn't appear to be any restriction. Like the president can't refuse to buy back stock in this manner. You just steal his money in exchange for burning your stock. That increases the value of the stock. Now, here we go. Here's where volatility comes in. Okay. And when stock is sold, it must be sold for 1 cent lower than the price, and it lowers the price of the stock. When an NPC does this, they will attempt to purchase the stock that they have the most stock in. If there's a draw, they will go for the least volatile stock they own. So far, we don't have an actual effect of volatility other than this. If there's still a draw, use the tie-breaking method. If they don't have any stock and they can't afford that stock, they'll try to purchase the stock that has the least volatility. If there is a draw, got into a recursive loop here that could go on forever, I think, or at least through the number of stocks there are. If the NPC cannot afford any stock, they will try to sell stock that they own, starting with the most volatile company, repeating the opposite of the above process. If a kid has the same amount of stock as the president and wants to purchase another stock, they have to pay twice the price. And that'll raise the price of the stock. This will trigger a takeover, and they become the president. They only get one share. The final payment, though, goes to the previous president for the takeover cost. If the president wants to buy more of their stock, there must be at least one other owner, and they must pay the stock price plus 1 to each shareholder for each share they own. So it's very hard to hold your own companies without paying a lot of money. Anybody can dilute the stock except the president. Wow. I'm not sure what this all is meant to represent again. And presidents can only sell their shares if they can find another kid who will purchase them. NPCs are willing to purchase a share if it is under the current price and they can afford it. So that's beginning to sound like you make an offer as the president, will you buy this share? The presidents can only sell their shares if they find another kid who will purchase them. Okay, so you can't force someone to take your company. And I guess you get to set the price where you want, because otherwise if it's under the current price, they won't be willing to do it. And I assume that doesn't affect the current price, selling shares to someone else. I'm not sure that you can deal shares between players who aren't the president, although that would certainly be a reasonable thing in an economy. Presidents can only sell their shares if they can find, yeah, there we go. Only one stock can be bought or sold per player per turn, and a stock cannot be purchased if there is a total of 10 stock in a company owned, because that's some kind of limit. I don't know. I don't know what happens to the price if the price of the stock is too high. Like, let's say the price is already at 10. Can you buy another share at that, without paying the excess price? I would say no. That once stock hits maximum, it cannot be sold. But again, not in the rules one way or the other. Okay, tax actions. If you have this, she has it. You can collect tax in villages that you're the chief of. Now, if an NPC is not a chief, or if there are no other kids with areas in the chief's villages, you ignore this. Players can choose to spare specific kids from taxes. If there are NPCs that they do this to, they increase their opinion of the taxer by 1. NPCs will spare other kids from taxes if their perceptive attribute of them is a 9. Which is the highest. The total taxes and cents charged by NPCs equal the number of areas owned times 10. You can charge less, but no more. For any NPCs that pays any money, their opinion of the chief will go down by 1. Players can choose to seize one area if the tax is not fully paid. If this is done against an NPC, the chief, their opinion will go down by 1 more. Now, this is opinion, not perceptive something or other, which are 2 different values that are tracked the same way, and I'm not sure how you tell them apart. But we'll see when I start playing whether any of this makes any sense at all. I suspect that I'm going to flub this completely, and that's life. If an NPC collects tax from someone who can't pay any or partial tax, they will seize an area if the perceptive attribute of them is 7 or lower. But again, there seems to be 2 things, opinion and perceptive. I seem to remember that these 2 were distinguished somewhere earlier. And again, finding something in here is hard. So, yeah, so you have a prestige. Oh, no, it's prestige and opinion. Okay, so I'm going to say the perceptive is the opinion. So far, we have not seen what prestige might mean. I don't think we've seen anything that has anything of it. So perceptive attribute and opinion, I guess, mean the same thing. Maybe, sort of, kind of. Okay, there's a gift action. Seriously? Here. Okay. You give currency by a kid to increase the opinion of the kid by the receiver. And you can only use this to kids who are currently in the same village. When an NPC takes this, they will choose to give a gift to the kid in the village they have the highest perceptive attribute of, which I think is opinion, remember. If the NPC does not have enough funds, their turn will be ignored. The cost in cents of giving a gift is 10 minus the receiver's. And, you know, because none of this is spelled out on the little cards or anything for the actions, what it means is you don't have the advantage you have in, say, a coin game where you can zone out on the charts and figure out what you can do. Instead, you kind of have to just guess, do I want to do this? What do I want to do? For the NPCs, it'll be easy. I roll a die, I look up what the effects are. For the players, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm kind of thinking about playing this with nothing but NPCs and just watching what happens. And then maybe step in and play a character or two. It is possible to play this solo. You just play one character and run all the NPCs. It's also possible to play it 0 player and just automate the whole thing and see what happens, which, I've played some video games that way. So what are we doing here? Gift. When an NPC takes it, they will give the gift to you. The cost is 10 minus the receiver's perceptive attribute of the player. Players must pay at least this amount to NPCs to receive an increase in opinion, but they can use any amount with other players. So, gift between players is just a way to transfer money. Gift with an NPC, you might be increasing their perception of you by giving them a gift. And I've got a problem, which is my battery's almost dead because the charger wasn't working. So I'm going to go and talk about the next set. The next series are a whole, and gift is kind of like this, are a whole series of actions that some kids have that allow them to influence opinions, which are totally unimportant if you're not playing with any NPCs. So the praise action, this will increase the opinion that an NPC has of another kid if successful. It must be done to a kid that is present in the same village. So I think all 3 kids have to be in the same village. But I'm not sure. For success, a number equal to or lower than the average of the subjective attribute. What? This is a new term? Is that the perceptive? It's certainly not the objective, I would think, would be, if there is anything, the prestige, because that sounds like it might be more, but maybe that's where this term is being hidden here. Of the kid performing the action, and the kid's subjective attribute of the praised kid must be rolled. Yeah, an example would be nice here, except that I have no idea what this term is. It has not been encountered before. If an NPC attempts to use this action, they will praise the kid in the game that has the highest subjective attribute to the kid in the village with the highest subjective attribute. If there is a draw, use the tie-breaking method. Do not pick a kid to praise who is already at 9 opinion with this. So 9 opinion may not be that subjective attribute. I don't know. And there we stopped for a while. There's a reason I didn't do this game down next to my wife. I knew this was going to infuriate me trying to parse through these rules. Now, the rules are very short. However, they're very dense, as you can see. I've only got like a page and a half left to go, though. So we should get through the rest of that in less than an hour. But there's no explanation. There's just these notes that don't quite hang together, as far as I can tell. And that is very painful. There's also very little to give me any kind of idea of what the fuck I'm trying to do here, except the end game thing. The final score is your currency, total currency, and stock value, which I assume the currency and stock value are both converted into money, into cents, which is, the gold standard or whatever. And that's it. At the end of the time, but what do I care about praising? Well, NPCs who like me better will do me good things. Do I want to give them gifts? I don't know. Maybe certain ones. All right, well, wandered away for longer than I intended, but at least my battery's charged. Some more of these actions. A praise action. If successful, must be done to a kid in the same village. For that success, you roll equal to or level than the average subjective attitude of the kid performing the action, and the kid's subjective attribute. Yeah, this is the one we were looking at. I have no idea what the hell they're talking about there. Okay, commend. Doing this will increase the opinion of that NPC has of the commander, I guess. No, the commender, sorry. Commander has to do with militias, which, we jumped over that, didn't we? Yeah, we jumped over that. I'll get back to that in a moment. That's called recruiting action. Okay, but anyway, the commender, if successful, for success, a number equal to or lower than the NPC's perceptive attribute of the kid performing the action must be rolled. Okay. If an NPC attempts to use this action, they will commend the kid in the village. They have the highest perceptive action of that does not already have an, I don't know. If an NPC attempts, they will commend the kid in the village. I don't even know what they're talking about. and this is where, basically, I got to about here in the game rules, and I was like, I no longer understand, because the the grammar starts falling apart completely. And these are things that only affect the NPCs, but I kind of wanted to play with about half the kids as players and half as NPCs. I will have to figure them out in real time, I think. Criticize, so you can increase the opinion that the NPC has of the one performing the action if successful. You have to do it to a kid in the same village. If the process fails, the kid being criticized will lose an opinion of the kid performing an action, which is different from most of these. For success, a number equal to or lower than the NPC's perceptive attribute of the criticizer must be rolled, which is, I think, again, going to be whatever the hell that thing was called, the opinion in other cases, and there's another word for it used elsewhere as well as opinion. Subjective. I mean, the perceptive attribute is what we've seen in general. We have this subjective attribute, which I don't know what the fuck that's meant to be. If an NPC uses the action, they will criticize the kid in the village they have the lowest perceptive attribute of. Bragging, it works like criticizing, but hits all the characters, all the kids in the village at once. Complaining, this is directed to a kid in the village using the same process as criticize, but involves all the different NPCs. Now, that sounds exactly like this, so I'm not sure. Brag is same as criticize, but the process is done to every kid in the village at the same time. Done to, I assume, is increasing the opinion, but this action is directed to one kid in the village, the same as criticize, but involves all NPCs. That sounds the same as this, essentially, because there's no perceptive or attribute or whatever you want to call it between, well, player characters do not have any opinion of anything, whatever that means. For the other kids in the village, a number equal to or less than 10 minus their perceptive attribute of the kid being complained to. And their perceptive attribute of the complainer must be rolled to decrease the opinion. Okay, so this decreases the opinion. Is that the penalty? Again, I don't know. You know, these things seem so unimportant compared to the main line of the game, but I wanted to use them. Unfortunately, the playthrough the designer doesn't use NPCs at all. From what I could tell, I had trouble watching it because, like I said, it's as bad as my videos. Let's jump back to the recruit action, because gossip is going to be another one of these. This will decrease the opinion that an NPC has of another kid if successful. Okay, that sounds pretty cool. For success, you have to roll lower than the average of their perceptive attribute of the kid performing the action and 10 minus the NPC's perceptive action of the kid gossiped about. So you talk to an NPC and you average essentially how well you're liked with, it's not the inverse, but it's 10 minus your value. So the higher your perception, the higher the perception of the person you're trying to insult or gossip about, the harder it's going to be. And if the NPC will gossip about whoever they like the least, if this process fails, the opinion of the kid listening to the gossip will go down of the kid performing the action, which, again, that makes sense. Of course, it's possible that NPCs will try to gossip to characters that they can't affect, I think. To the kid in the village, they have the highest perceptive action. Yeah, so they may pick someone who doesn't have opinions and do this to them, and then I don't know. It doesn't really do anything. Okay, the steal action. The kid attempting this must pick a kid in the same village to steal from. If an NPC is doing this, they pick on the person they like the least. If an NPC is the victim, no matter what, they're going to lose an opinion, which I think is the perceptive attribute. But again, you know, so many terms, and there seem to be two values defined, sort of, but they're not really, like, so far we haven't gotten to the reputation or whatever the more general value is. And yeah, this is part of why I wandered away. The same reason I couldn't make it through the rules. We're almost at the end, so we'll just keep trying to push through these. If you're successful, you take 10% of a random currency in the victim's treasury given to the thief. And I assume that's rounded up. I don't know. Let's jump back to the recruit action, because before we get to the attack, we have to understand this. You can ask any kid to join your personal militia, but you can only ask one kid per turn to join it. Kids that have others in their militia are commanders, not commenders. If an NPC is asked to join a militia, the roll has to be equal to or lower than their perceptive attribute of the commander. NPCs that use the action will attempt to recruit the person, I guess, that they like the most, not the person who likes them the most. It's not clear because it's based on the highest perceptive attribute. It doesn't say which person's. And I could see it going either way, you know. If it was a player, they would go for whoever sees them the best. But as an NPC, who knows? If an NPC is a commander of a militia, they cannot be recruited. NPCs will not try to recruit them either. If a kid attempts to recruit an NPC that's already in another kid's militia, they must roll a number equal to or less than the average of basically the negation of the view of one side with the view of the other side. which should work well enough. Now, there's no statement here what happens when you're in a militia. I'm hoping that's covered over here in the attack action, because nothing else can do this. And again, there's a lot that doesn't seem to have rules for it, including this, which I'm just going to say is part of the expansion. When you do an attack action, every kid currently present at the household that's either in the militia of the attacker or the defender is involved. Attack cannot be used by a kid that is in someone else's militia unless the commander of that militia allows it. If players can choose, NPCs will allow attack as long as they don't have a perception attribute of 7 or higher with any defending kid. When an NPC attacks, they must choose to attack the kid that has the lowest perceptive attribute of, and it cannot be 7 or higher of any defending kid, or the attack will be canceled. After the sides are determined, all the defenders' opinions of the attackers must go down by 1 of all the attackers. Then each kid rolls a 10-sided die. If the number is equal to or less than their fighting ability, hey, we found that this worked, or where fighting ability comes into play. We still don't have exploration. Again, I think that's going to be part of the advanced rules, which may increase, say, the maximum number of areas. That would be my guess. I'm not sure. There are secrets in it too, supposedly, according to this. Secret locations. Excuse me. Okay. I'm getting a glare here that wasn't before, so it's hard to read this. Every kid on the winning side gets 1 increase in prestige, and every kid on the losing side gets 1 decrease in prestige. Ooh, we found something that affects this. This is the first time prestige has been mentioned, unless it happens to be the subjective attribute. Regardless of the location, the commander of the winning side can choose to take 1 area of one of the loser's areas. If they exist, this will lower the opinion the former owner has of the commander down 1 more. NPCs will only make this choice if there's at least 1 kid on the opposing side that they have a 5 or lower perceptive attribute of, and if so, the NPC will choose whoever they dislike the most. Okay, so we don't know what prestige does, and we don't know for sure what the subjective attribute is. They don't really align well, but maybe they are the same thing. Travel action. Players can use this to go to a different village or household. If an NPC chooses it, they have to roll a 10-sided die. If they're in a household with more than 1 village, if even, they will remain at household, and if they get even, they'll remain. If odd, they go somewhere else to a different household. Next, they roll for each other household in the game or other village in the household they're staying at, and choose to go to that the one that they kind of randomly go to. If they go to a different household that has at least 1 village, then they have to determine which village at random. Rent has to be paid, this is the first time we've discussed rent, by any kid visiting a village that has at least 1 area and accepts at least 1 currency. If they can't afford it, the village does not the village does not accept a currency. They cannot move there unless a kid who owns an area lets them. NPCs will let any character they see they have a perceptive of 7 or higher for in. Otherwise, though, the kid will attempt to go somewhere else. The rent is going to cost the number of areas the renter owns in the village. Again, there's a reason why lots of areas in one village become more valuable, but the NPCs devalue areas that they have many of in a village when they're buying and selling, which I found kind of strange. If multiple kids own areas in village, NPC will choose to stay at kids' area that they have the highest perceptive attribute of. And the lounge action is skip a turn. You wouldn't do that if you're playing it. Like I said, and from my communications with the designer, I get the feeling that he understands that this is basically a draft. I'm very interested in giving it a shot, but it seems kind of strange to release something in this condition to be reviewed. And, you know, I take one look at things in general. So I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can make hide or hair out of the play, including the NPC actions. But this has been very discouraging. My attempts to read it prior to setting it up and doing it on camera have not been more successful. But they weren't necessarily less successful either. There were a few things that maybe looking at the pieces while I was reading the rules helped a little bit, but I don't feel like, you know, starting to set things up and work through with the focus of the camera or whatever helped at all. To begin with, the style of the rulebook is just wrong. I mean, like I said, it's more like notes than anything else. It is not something, it's not something that I would expect anyone else to be able to follow. It's in a condition that, you know, if you already know the game and you wrote it, maybe it serves as a decent reference, but as it stands, no, I can't say it does. All right, let's send this up.